Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Heretics Podcast. This is the official podcast of the United Jewish People's Order and the Morris Winchevsky Center. We are a secular, progressive Canadian Jewish organization that's been around since the 1920s. My name's David Wall, and I am the community's cultural programmer and your host for today. For this, the fifth episode of our podcast, I had the honor of interviewing Eitan Bronstein Aparicio and Eléonore Merza Bronstein. These two have for many years been considered sort of a power couple of radical Jewish thought and activism. Eléonore is an accomplished academic who has explored the complexities of racial and ethnic intersections in Israeli society and the myriad economic and societal effects of occupation. Eitan is an Israeli educator and writer, co-founder of the NGO Zochrot, which seeks to educate about the Nakba and the legitimacy of the Palestinian right of return. Along with Eléonore, he founded De-colonizer, a research and art laboratory aimed at creating cultural tools that go beyond colonialist and racist imaginings of Israel-Palestine. Their most recent project together is the book Nakba, The Struggle to De-colonize Israel. Our interview together took place on October 10th, a mere 3 days after the Hamas attacks in Israel and the beginning of Israeli bombings in Gaza. It was originally meant as a preview of their upcoming book tour of Canada, which includes an appearance at the United Jewish People's Order's film festival called Split Screens, Israeli Filmmakers Face Colonialism, which is happening at OCAD University in Toronto on 4 consecutive Sundays. As you will hear, it quickly became obvious that the recent, in many ways unprecedented violence needed to be addressed. Here's our conversation. Eitan and Eléonore, thank you so much for taking time out to be on our podcast. We had planned, I've had some email correspondence with Eitan over the last couple of weeks. We were planning on meeting to talk about your latest book and the accompanying tour you're doing of Canada. But since then, of course, there's been this horrific violence in Israel and Gaza, which feels to us in the West, at least, as unprecedented on so many levels. And of course, for our interview, it would feel like the most oversized elephant in our Zoom room. So I want to ask, you're in Brussels, but what is the mood on the ground in Israel, especially among you and your friends on the left, even radical left, in terms of how things are shaping up in the near future, in terms of Hamas, Netanyahu, in terms of the violence? Can you guys just freestyle a bit about your feelings right now and about feelings of people you know in Israel, Palestine?
Yeah, I can start and say that, I think from what I feel, we are very close, closely connected. We have family there, I have kids, grandkids, and many friends. And I have to say that I think on the first level, the emotional level, we are very, very much united in the sorrow and the shock of what happened last Saturday, with this massive attack by Palestinians in south of Palestine, now Israel. And everyone, I don't know anyone who doesn't know someone that is directly affected by it, either kidnapped, killed, or, we too, we have close friends or family of friends or comrades.
People with who we worked.
Yeah, so on that level, I don't think there is much difference between ideological positions. Now, of course, on the bigger picture, and for example, what started now, the massive attack on Gaza, here we part our ways, many of us see what is Israel start to do now is a terrible retaliation, just to kind of to reconstruct maybe the pride, this stupid thing, really militaristic and nationalist feeling. But yes, there is a huge shock. Yes.
Yeah, I would say that we are mourning. We are mourning friends, colleagues, partners very deeply. But we don't value Jewish life more than other lives. So we are also mourning Palestinians' life, people that are getting killed right now in Gaza. And we can also understand on the political level, on the theoretical level, what led to what happened last weekend. So I would say that we are in a position also that it's, the word is very binary, like you are either supporting full-time what's happening without saying a word about civilians that were massacred, or you are a traitor. Like, things are very easy for many people, and we are in a position that it's complicated as political activists, because we are sad, we are deeply sad. I'm in shock. I'm shocked about what's happening, and I continue to be very mad and very shocked by what Israel has been doing for the last 70 years, because what's happening now in Gaza, it's the continuation of a colonial policy as we know. So we are very sad and very mad.
Is it too soon to talk about those things because of all the shock, or what kind of license do we have to talk about the fact that so many people saw this as maybe didn't see how shocking it would be, but saw this as almost an inevitability?
I believe it's very important to talk about it also as Jews, as you are doing, you guys there, and that we are trying to do also here. We belong to UJPO, I don't know how to say it, Union of Progressive Jews, that most of them are non-Zionist here in Brussels. And we felt very much the need to talk also about what's happening, because we have been the traitors for so many years, but now it takes another dimension. So we are still the traitors for some, but for others, we are also like, you're like, it's, I believe it's complicated, but we have to have this talk. And I'm very thankful that we can talk about it with you also today.
My mind goes to politics always, and I wonder about the Netanyahu government. I wonder about what's going to happen now, because there were some, I dare say, positive things going on politically in Israel around these huge protests, around looking at the Netanyahu government as failed, as fascist, and I get this sinking feeling that's all now negated, that there's going to be a kind of unification, reminding me of what happened after 9/11, when suddenly George Bush became this wartime president, and there was, he had 70% approval rating. And is this going to happen with Netanyahu, do you think? Or do you think that this massive security failure will lead finally to the demise of this horrific political figure and his government?
Yeah, of course, it's very difficult to tell, because we are really in the peak of the violence now, and it seems it's going to go long. And I think you're right in the sense that Netanyahu, for sure, I know for him it's an opportunity now, maybe to get rid of all these protests, because now it's going into a unity government, and also to get rid of this juridical revolution that he is trying to pass, but it went too far. Also for him, it's clear that he doesn't want it anymore, but he couldn't. He really is captured by his partners in the government, the coalition. So yeah, in a way he sees it as an opportunity, but I think it's very much depend on how it will evolve, because
Yeah.
If Israelis will see what happened, or at least now the consequences, as a victory, which I'm afraid what they see as a victory, it would be very terrible
Disaster for humanity.
Yeah, for humans, for Palestinians. Then he might get out from it like with a big victory. But I really doubt. I think the clashes are too deep, and I think it in some way we will go back to, maybe not with him, but the clashes with the extreme right wing. It's here, and it will stay, and it will get stronger in the future.
I hate to even ask, but what do you think of victory? What does a victory for Netanyahu mean?
Yeah, for example, if they will succeed to kill the heads of the Hamas, for example, he can argue that I think it's quite stupid argument, but to say, okay, here we destroyed them and we killed the political leadership. Of course, what's the point? I mean, there will be others, new ones, but at least maybe he can present it as a big success. Maybe he will succeed to drastically reduce the military capacity of Hamas. Yeah, things like that. But for the long run, I don't think this is a big change.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I guess, sorry.
What we see, and as you mentioned earlier, we've seen it already, is that unity, the Israeliness is united again in case of war. So, like, there are some thing around it about thinking that what unite everyone is the war or the danger that they feel. So now all the protests in Israel stopped, and they said it very clearly, even in the demo where there were no war around. They were saying, in case of big problem, because it's not about the ideology. They continue to believe in Zionist colonial enterprise. They just want to remain the biggest eater of the cake. They don't want to be forgiven, but they want to be part of this. So I don't see any massive crack on the Zionist enterprise. And we see that now. I believe that what will be very important in the future of this government, it's how they are going to deal or to hand with the hostages. Because this is like the civil society is putting a lot of pressure on the government to bring back the hostages, and we know that this is like the nightmare for the Israeli government.
Does that involve negotiations? You can't do an Entebbe style thing, I guess. Anyway, this is getting into weeds that I mean, it's just like conjecture. We'll have to see what happens, and I'm sure that the rest of our interview today will be tempered, will be, for want of a better term, infected by what's going on as I go through questions that I prepared last week before any of this happened. Can we move on to some other things? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. And thank you for also making space for this little talk at the beginning. Thank you.
Oh, well, it had to happen, unfortunately. One of the central ideas of this podcast is to discuss what we call Jewish trajectory. So how people develop as Jews into being what we call Jewish heretics, people who are working against the grain. And I think that the term Jewish heretics really applies to you guys in a way that some of our other interview subjects, it's been a little bit less clear. You guys are exemplary in this context. Can you guys tell me briefly about your upbringings and how you got to your current worldviews? Did you have traditional Jewish upbringings, observant Jewish upbringings, and how did you come to be radicalized in this way?
Yeah. To say it in few words, I try, but because for me there are at least two different parts in your question. Because radicalization for me doesn't have, my own political radicalization doesn't have much to do with my Judaism, and
Right.
I can explain. The Eléonore is different, but
Yeah.
mine. I grew up in a kibbutz, in fact, in atmosphere, but also in a reality that not only was not really Jewish tradition. We kept some traditions, of course, weddings, bar mitzvah around me, not me personally, but others. Most of the kids did bar mitzvah, so some traditions, and of course, Seder Pesach, stuff like that. Yes, we were celebrating all the kibbutz together. But other than that, in terms of really religious, it was, I would say bluntly, it was at least non-religious at all, or even anti-religious. Like
Right.
I grew up rejecting Judaism, and when I grew up, it emerged very, very well in a way with the understanding when I became more and more political conscious, anti-Zionist. So it merged very well with the me seeing Judaism in Israel only as connected to Zionism or to the Jewish state. I cannot tell you of really any experience in all the years I lived in Israel of something that it's really Jewish, or connected to Judaism, that it's not kind of kidnapped, if I can use this sensitive word now, kidnapped by the state, by the Zionist state, by the nationalistic state. So in other words, in every Bet Knesset or in every, any Israeli festive, Leila Seder, the Agadah that we read, always the connection between Amalek and the Palestinians or the Arabs, and all kind of that stuff. So it's always used to continue producing the Israeli subject citizen that is always a soldier. It's a very important component.
Right.
And so my radicalization in few words, I in fact it was during the army service. It started in the army service, and this is what we talk about it a lot in the book that we wrote together. When I faced being occupier, being colonizer the first time, the first basic training in the army when I was 19 years old. And then it started when I experienced being an occupier, and then after that in first Lebanon war, I opposed the war, so I rejected, I refused, and I was in jail a month, and then the first Intifada, again I was jailed twice for refusing oppressing this uprising, the Palestinians uprising. But so you understand, it's like two parallel roads, I would say. My political radicalization, I don't see really connection to Judaism. And the Judaism, it's been, I see it only as in Israel as only instrumentalized to create and reproduce Israeli soldiers. Just one or two sentences to end. Since 4 years ago that we moved out from Israel, on the my Jewish identity for the first time has a kind of suddenly I find it. I had some experiences that I felt for the first time in my life happy and proud to be a Jewish.
Wow.
I don't think I would ever think and say this. The first time it happened in the commemoration to the uprising, the ghetto Warsaw, uprising, and we commemorated it together with the organization that Eléonore mentioned before, with Jewish organization, and I went to this ceremony, and I was all the time waiting that they will say, like in Israel, every ceremony to the Holocaust, every connected to the needs to have a strong army. And because the main lesson from the Holocaust, it's not that it will not happen again, never again, it's that it will not happen to us, never again. Only to us. So we need an army. We just saw what the army is capable to do a few days ago. So you see that it's the first time that I say, wow, we can be Jews, remember our victims, remembering our uprising, tradition, singing in Yiddish, suddenly there are things that I never experienced in Israel. Quite a wow for me, yes.
Amazing.
Yeah, Eléonore.
I have a very different story. I am radical because I am a Jew. I grew up in the what we used to call the radical left, which back then was led and critically thought by Jews. So I had a Jewish life, a Jewish identification before Israel. I was not born in Israel. I went in Israel to do my PhD. It happened that I stayed at the end more than 10 to 12 years there, but in fact, it's quite the contrary. What I faced in Israel, that I felt deprived from my Judaism, from my Jewishness when I was in Israel. I could barely have the Jewish life in Israel, exactly because of all what Eitan just described now. I could not attend the synagogue because at the end you would have to give coins for the soldiers. I could not attend any Holocaust ceremony because I would heard that we have to get a stronger army. So I felt deprived from my Jewishness, and I'm happily finding back my Jewishness now that we are, I would say, I don't say in Galut because I think the idea of exile means that there is a center that I don't recognize Israel as the center of my Jewishness and Judaism. So in fact, when Israel leads a political, colonial, oppressive project in the name of my Judaism, of my Jewishness, of our Jewishness, then I feel really deprived. And I'm very happy now that we are in Europe. We are in Belgium, and we have a Jewish life here. We are organizing feminist and anti-colonialist Kabbalat Shabbat with friends. So it's the family that you choose, all of them are Jews. Broken Jews, as we like to call ourselves. We are not the perfect Jews, we are the traitors, and we have different opinions, by the way. We are not thinking all the same about what's happening now, for example. And I'm very happy to be able to reconnect and to raise my kid with some of the spiritual values of Judaism that I strongly believe in it. Judaism of solidarity, of kindness, of openness, of anti-fascism, of anti-racism, a feminist way to look at all this heritage. I'm very proud that my kid can be raised now with some of those values. And for you to know, like I think, Eitan, it was maybe the first time for you, that last weekend, last Friday, we went to a synagogue, a liberal synagogue here in Brussels. And it happened that there was a dinner after that we were invited. I want to say that we were very warmly welcomed in this synagogue. And we had talks there, Eitan and I, that I could not believe I could have in a synagogue with people. We talked about Palestine, we talked about colonialism, we talked about why we left Israel. And of course, people did not agree with us. I don't say we convinced the mass while we talk, but we could have this talk. And we didn't feel excluded from the community because we had this talk. So for me, this is very positive.
It's fascinating to me, all of this, because I don't have a clear sense of what it's like to be in Israel. There's myths over here in the West in Canada. And I've never had a strong connection to Israel. I went as a child and also once as a 15-year-old. But I grew up in a left, even socialist Jewish milieu, secularized, with Yiddish songs, with a sense of being diasporic, where these ideas were not always agreed with, but were certainly entertained and talked about. So is it actually true? Like, these, it sounds, both of you, like you're saying that a kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Liberated Jewish idea is just not welcome and doesn't even exist in Israel. Is this what you're saying?
It didn't exist, at least in our milieu. I don't know enough to say that it doesn't exist for sure anywhere, but in our milieu, which was the radical left, the anti-Zionist left in Israel, I barely know anyone that go to synagogue or that has really a Jewish life. I mean, and we could discuss what is it to have a Jewish life also. Huh? You can have a full Jewish life and identify fully as Jew and not setting a foot in a synagogue. I don't want to reduce Jewishness to this, but in our milieu, being a Jew, by the way, in the radical left that I grew up, it was the same. Being a Jew was a non-subject.
Wow. Yeah.
So, and I was raised by communist parents, so it was a non-subject, you know. And it's by growing up also and seeing, I was very much influenced by one American rabbi that his name is Brent Rosen. He's the head of Tzedek in Chicago community. I was very impressed the first time that I met him and I talked with him, and I remember very well, he was in our house in Tel Aviv, and I told Eitan, okay, I could not even imagine this exists, you know, a rabbi that is writing a full office about why as Jews we need to recognize the Nakba, why as Jews we need to be so, it's our place is so strongly in the social protest, in the Black Lives Matter protest, in the anti-racist protest as Jews. And this is something that was very impressive for me, because this was where we stood politically, but not really as Jews. So he was one of the first that really showed me that we can exist in this setting as Jews and as proud Jews.
And even perhaps to draw from Jewish traditions or Jewish ideas to come to these conclusions. Yeah.
Exactly.
Just it's something for the sake of precising something. Let's not forget, of course, there are other milieus in Israel. For example, if you go in the Haredim communities, the ultra-Orthodox, of course, you have big communities that they don't really care about the state, and they don't, even some of them are non-Zionist.
Some of them don't recognize the state.
Don't even recognize the state. Yes, more minority. Yeah. So, among the ultra-Orthodox, which is big numbers, more than 10% of the population, but it's very much like another universe for us. You know, we don't really engage with them. So I would not argue that there is no Jewish tradition or expressions in Israel that are not connected to the state of Israel or instrument. Right. For sure, there are some.
But it wasn't in your local experience.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. In our milieu, in our secular,
not around us. Yes,
secular lefty Tel Avivan milieu, to summarize it quickly.
There were some attempts.
There were, in fact, there is something very sad in what we just said. Now, when Eitan said, and it's the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox people with who we don't engage. And it's very sad because we are also part of this heritage of being like secular Jews, that, it's not our word and we don't have more or less anything to see with them. And in fact, it's quite sad for me that we don't succeed to address more and to share more. And I remember I was also very impressed about this. There were some political actions, mostly around the refusnikim, kids that refused to go to the army. And there were some rapprochement, like some kind of talks between lefty activists and Haredim activists about how to organize against this how to say the army when the drafting in the army. And I remember it was for me it was very interesting to look at this picture, because it was exactly two words that are very different and that are trying to talk, not to convince each other. The Haredim are not going to become radical secular lefties, and the other ones are not going to become ultra-Orthodox, but trying to look together at one political objection, which is to reject the participation in the army, by the way, for very different reasons. But I found it at least, interesting, let's say, stimulating.
This is all very interesting to hear, because I guess one of the myths or attitudes that we have here in the diaspora, in Canada specifically, is that Israel is kind of a lost cause, that it's turned into this sort of right-wing monoculture, and that a viable left alternative has evaporated, has basically disappeared. Is this true? Do you guys have any sense of hope around mobilization in the coming years of a real viable left, or is it gone?
I fully agree with your notion, your analysis from Canada. Maybe from far we see it easier. That yes, I think there is not really. It's not viable. This project of having a Jewish state is really not viable. I think we see it quite long time, and now I think with this right-wing government from the recent years, but moreover this last government shows the way, really the direction that this state and also society is taking. And even if this government will be changed soon, and Netanyahu will be down, and there will be a little bit more central, somewhat liberal government, I think this is the direction Israel is taking for many years, and it's been accelerating in the last couple of years. And I think in a way it's a lost cause. Yes, and I think I see also hope in it, because I think there is a potential now, or at least an opportunity or possibility to imagine completely another future for people living in that part of the world, Palestinians, both Muslims and Christians, but also Jews. Will be able maybe to share the same land with equal rights. Yes, I hope so.
Eléonore, do you have anything to say in this regard?
You will hear rarely from me, but I think I agree with Eitan.
I don't agree.
No, I agree in the big image, and don't have anything specific to say now.
Okay, so I didn't mean is the Israeli state viable? Well, I'm glad that you said that, but I was asking, is there a viable left anymore? Because the sense we have here is that it's basically gone, that there's no real viable left-wing voice in Israel. That's what I was speaking to specifically. It's like everything's right-wing, everything's been taken, the left has evaporated. It's not, that's what I meant by viability.
So for me, on this specific point, like I want to say two things. First is that we are facing now a very big hemorrhage of the leftists. Many of them, including us, left or out of the country. And in Winchevsky Center, you also know about some Israelis that left the country when they could. I want to emphasize on this point also that not everyone has the privilege to leave. We were privileged enough to have what we call white passport that allow us to live in Europe or in Canada or in the US. This is not the case for everyone. There are people that are stuck there and don't have any other place where they can move to. So it's important for me also to acknowledge that it's a privilege to be able to live. And the second thing that I want to emphasize is that for me, the wording of left and right in the Israeli colonial project is much more blurred than it is, for example, in Belgium or maybe, but I know very little about Canada. Like for me, the line of analysis is Zionist toward non-Zionist. So we tend to forget that the colonial project in Palestine, today called Israel, was led by the Zionist left in the name of the left. That's what also makes decolonization so difficult. So I, for example, I have very, very little hope, and I don't trust the Zionist left to represent the interest of the people. So for me, the line is really between Zionist and non-Zionist, not really left and right. Of course, I acknowledge that the far right in the government is doing much more terrible thing than people from Meretz. And I don't want also to say that everyone is the same. But at the end of the day, the colonial project is not shaped by all this.
Yes. Yeah. Also, to add to that, I agree with the things. Just there is no really left. I can say that almost never there was a real left among the Jews in Israel. They were somewhat more liberal, and also today you can say, okay, there are parties that are, or part of the population is more liberal, and those are protesting today, but they are fully Zionist. Their main symbol is the flags that they carry, thousands of flags in every demonstration, and the uniforms of they have some kind of uniforms, armed uniform that they dress to show how they are patriotic with Israel. And so there is no really left. So there can be very much that this really amazing protest that really floods Israel. It's quite amazing in terms of numbers and persistence and mobilization. But what might come out of it, I'm afraid it's not more or less reconstruct the good old order of the Zionist left controlling maybe for some time. Maybe it's not even, it will be more right-wing than before, but so it's not that there is really project of left in Israel. It doesn't exist among the Jews. It's so small minority that it's, and to add to that what Eléonore said, that people that are living left, many of them, and now in this situation of this last government, the wave is growing. There are more and more people are leaving, and following what's happening now, I believe there will be even more people that will leave the country. So Jews. So I don't see that it's coming out. There will be a big left as a reaction to all this.
Yeah, and also, if I might add, there is something in the formation of the left in Israel that, for example, contrary to many left in the world and in Europe, from what I know, are also sharing internationalist vision, which is not the case in Israel. And I always say it as a joke, but I don't know, Eitan, if you remember, once we were in a demo and we started to sing El Pueblo Unido, Jamás será vencido, and one prominent lefty activist ran to us asking, why are you shouting Hamas? Why are you shooting Hamas? And I was so shocked. I told Eitan, but cannot be that he doesn't know, this is like the hymnal of any lefty in the world, I think. And so I believe also that there is a lack in the formation of the left in Israel of connection with other struggles, because it's difficult for this left to go out of the ethno-nationalist setting. So for me, I never miss a chance to tell this story.
But I have another one on this line exactly. But it's nice small stories that show that how left is not existent in Israel. So for example, in our wedding, we got married in Paris. And suddenly, spontaneously, all Eléonore's friends, comrades, stood up and started to sing the Internationale in French. And my sister-in-law, she said loudly, like she always speaks loudly. So she said, why they singing the Marseillaise?
No, she said, you see how they are proud to sing their national anthem.
Oh, it's funny. It's funny and sad, yeah.
Yeah, and if you talk with her, she would define herself as a lefty. Yeah. So it's interesting also the way people see themselves, and comparing to Smotrich, she's a lefty, right? Yeah. But like in the lens of what means left in the world and in the social world, it's a bit different, but yeah.
Well, it's like an insular, navel-gazing left. It's like within a bubble, like we like to say. That's the parlance of the day. We're having this marvelous conversation, in my opinion, anyway. But I do want to talk about your book and the fact that you're coming to Canada, if we can squeeze that in. So your latest book, it's Nakba: The Struggle to De-colonize Israel. Yeah, it's just been translated into English. That's the book that you're touring. I'm correct, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So. It deals with the history of, among other things, the history of Israeli attitudes toward the Nakba as a starting place for talking about decolonizing Israel and moving towards a vision of a just society. Can you guys talk about the history of this Nakba denialism? Have attitudes been changing in Israel around it? Do you see any willingness in the Israeli mainstream to at least begin to talk about historical acceptance or historical analysis that's more all-encompassing around the Nakba?
Yes, in fact, the book describes the work that we did mainly with the Zochrot organization that I founded in 2001, which is a small group of mainly Jewish Israelis, started to go around the country and post signs to indicate the destroyed localities of Palestinians since 1948 at the Nakba. And we, in fact, succeed really to bring to a big change in the level of the discourse, in the sense that nowadays the term Nakba being used a lot in Israel. When I started this work, I Googled the term Nakba in Hebrew, there was almost zero results. Today, if you Google Nakba in Hebrew, maybe, I don't know, hundreds of thousands. I can give just a recent example, very sad one, because Israelis are misusing this term, but they use it all the time. One parliament member, yesterday it was, I think, or before yesterday, published a post when he used the term Nakba twice in the short post, saying basically that what we should do in Gaza, it's the Nakba of 2023, like we did in 1948. We should complete the job and expel all the Palestinians from Gaza. So the Israelis know this today. If he would write the same post 30 years ago, nobody would know or connect to this term. So on the level of knowing something about it, being aware, yes, there is a change. Politically, to say that something really changed, this is very difficult to tell. I don't see a real difference. I think Israel is become even more right-wing. Throughout our work, maybe the main reaction by the government to our work was the Nakba law, what's called the Nakba law that was passed in 2011 and by Likud government, and that aims to prevent any commemoration and discussion about the Nakba. So yes, so there were changes through the years, and we describe it in our work. But the bottom line today, I would not say that there is much hope around it in the political level, let's say. Yeah.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to just switch the conversation a bit, maybe. So another thing that's really not talked about very much here with much depth, maybe Eléonore, you can speak to this, is the multicultural aspect of Israel. There's a kind of, again, we see Israel often as a monoculture, as an Ashkenazic state. And Canada has, there's a lot of similarities between Canada and Israel. Certainly our colonial history and ongoing colonial oppression of our First Nations people. There's definitely a continuum. But one thing that Canada has is this kind of multiculturalism, state sanctions, state promoted multiculturalism. And we don't see Israel very often as a kind of multiple racialized and ethnicized minority populations, which it is. Can you talk about the interplay of different identities in Israel and how this is playing into the political landscape there? Who's excluded, who's included, things like that.
Yeah, in fact, the reality is multicultural and multi-diverse. But when you look about the power relations that are in Israel, Israel was created by white Ashkenazi European, and without any surprise, to be a good Israeli is to be an Ashkenazi until now. So we are like, this was documented by millions of articles and testimonies about the racism that was that faced what we call the Mizrahim, the Arab Jews from Arab background or countries that were forced to abandon their language, their name, to become true Israelis. And to become true Israeli was meant to be a true Zionist, to be whitened. So the multicultural is a myth in Israel when you look at it in terms of who own the power, who own the public space, and so we see resistances for some tens of years now with the Jews from Ethiopian, Black Jews or Arab Jews that are like being now more vocal. But when you look at the localities that are the poorest in Israel, they are not full of Ashkenazi people. The Ashkenazi got the kibbutz, and the Mizrahim got the south. They got Sderot, where now is happening all the trouble. And I think like Israel like to present itself as a multicultural with it's even written in the constitution, equal rights for everyone, with all the religion and belief and so on. But this is in very clear contradiction with the essence of being a Jewish state. A Jewish state draw a line between the good and the less good citizens. If you are not a Jew, you don't have fully the same rights or your space, the same space, or the same opportunities at work or economically than Jews. And this doesn't, again, I'm saying that this doesn't mean that all the Jews are equally treated, because the Jews from Ethiopia, for example, are still until now considered they are too black to be real Jews for many of the Israelis. So I would say that this multiculturalism is somehow a reality. You have Jews from Yemen and Jews from Poland in the same piece of land, but there is no really mixing. And you can see until now the very little number of mixed wedding. And mixed wedding in Israel is not wedding between Jews and Muslim or Jews with Christian. It's between Ashkenazi and Mizrahi Jews. There are very little unions, wedding.
I want to add to that. It's very important part of the political system, in fact, of the Israeli colonialism. I think if you don't take in consideration, or you don't look into the how Israel treated the Mizrahim, the Arab Jews, when they immigrated, or they were brought, in fact, by the Zionists, Ashkenazi, to replace the Arab workers and to exploit them, you don't really understand the essence of the colonial Zionism. Because when it's only about the Palestinians, oppression of Palestinians, you can always think, okay, they are kind of the enemy of the state. Yes, they are very different from us and they are against us. But Jews, if it's a Jewish state, it was supposed to be equal for all Jews. And it's not at all the case since the very beginning, and continues today. So this is very important component of the colonial order in Israel.
And to add to what Eitan just said, on the map that we researched and produced at De-colonizer, there is this map is called Colonialism in Destruction, which aims to show that the colonial project is about destructing historical Palestine, but it's also very active, it's ongoing. So one of the categories that we had to this map were the Mizrahi localities, the Jewish localities that were destroyed within the colonial context. Like Israel put some of its more vulnerable population in some of the places because they wanted them to hold the houses where they just expelled Palestinians from. And they told these people from Yemen, from Iraq, please stay there and keep the houses to prevent the return of Palestinians. It's the case in Sumail, which used to be a village that is now in the center of Tel Aviv. And when the danger of the return of the refugee in an Israeli perspective is far, then we kicked out this population, the same population that were used to keep the place. When it's about capitalism, when it's about making money, building in the center of Tel Aviv, that is one of the most expensive city right now, there is nothing about what they did. They are used. We are using them, and when we don't need them anymore, we move them.
Would it be accurate to make a characterization of multiple classes in a hierarchy? So you have first-class citizens, second-class citizens, third-class citizens, and then maybe fourth is where actual Palestinians are. So that there's a sense of hierarchy with Ashkenazi Jews at the top, and then is it kind of like that there's multiple classes of Jews and citizens in Israel?
Yeah, it is. It was very clear at the beginning, the first decades of the creation of the State of Israel, but until today there are differences that are very clear in terms of in statistics. We see them, for example, in the socio-economical level. Yes, of course, the mostly Ashkenazi are in the more top layers. And yes, it goes down with the different Mizrahi or Arab Jews, and then Black Jews, and yes, and of course Palestinians are at the bottom. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there is, I believe, a slight difference between what is in the law. In the law, there is clearly A class citizen and B class citizen. Moreover, it was formalized by the nation state law that was passed few years ago. But this is on the paper. So this difference between non-Jews and Jews is written now on the paper. It's in the law. But there is also what there is in practice. Like in the law, all the Jews in Israel are equal. But in the practices, it's not the case. While Palestinians are not equal by the law. It's stated now. It's not even a myth. And I believe that Israel is not even trying to fulfill the myth. It's like it's a clear Jewish state for Jews only or nearly only. There is a strong work done by the state with what we called preferred minorities to weaken the non-Jewish population there. So there are rights that are given to some minorities in Israel that are not given to the Palestinians, for example.
I feel like I would love to pick your brains for hours. You're both so brilliant and eloquent. But we should wrap up. And I must say, I'm really looking forward to meeting you guys. You were scheduled to speak at a film festival that the Winchevsky Center United Jewish People's Order is co-presenting called Split Screens. Israeli filmmakers confront colonialism. And you are doing a book tour coming up in Canada in support of your latest book. So you're coming to Toronto. Are you going elsewhere as well?
Yeah, we'll be in Montreal, Ottawa,
Hamilton, London. I think that's we are Winnipeg.
Oh.
And right now I want to say that we are very thankful and excited to come to meet you all, guys. We are really looking forward. And we are right now trying to educate ourselves about the proper way to present in Canada today in regard of the lens on which Canada has been built. So we are educating ourselves. I hope we'll do what we can, not to offend anyone, but we are very excited to come.
And of course, you need to be prepared to be speaking about what's going on in Israel Palestine right now. That's gonna you're gonna get a lot of questions about that. So, be prepared, as they say. Anyway, I want to thank you guys so much for taking this time out, and I'm looking forward to meeting you soon.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, David.
Thank you so much.
See you soon.
Well, we've come to the end of our show. We'd like to thank you for listening, and we'd like to thank everyone who made our podcast possible, including United Jewish People's Order Executive Directors Serena Sarin, and our guests Eitan Bronstein Aparicio and Eléonore Merza Bronstein. This podcast was recorded at Walt Whitman Studios in Toronto. The theme music was composed by Serena Sarin, with help from me. My name's David Wall. Until next time, seid gesund.